Hi guys, today we'll discuss about COVID-19. Why this lecture is required? Because it will bring all the essentials at one place. This video will be helpful for NEET PG aspirants so that they don't have to run after various resources. All the data, all the treatment protocols, all the investigation protocols are taken from the website of Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Let's see the overview. We'll discuss about the magnitude of problem, the timeline, virus and its pathogenesis, clinical features, identification of a high-risk individual, what are the various clinical categories of the disease, what various investigations we have to do, treatment, and then finally prevention. Coming to the magnitude of problem. When we talk about the magnitude of problem, the disease name is Coronavirus Disease 2019, the short form being COVID-19. The causative organism is SARS-CoV-2. It is related to SARS virus, which had an outbreak in 2002 in China, and also the MERS virus. The family is Coronaviridae. The order is Nidovirales. Realm is Riboviria. And genus is Beta coronavirus. The incubation period of this disease is 2 to 14 days, median being 5 to 7 days. The disease originated from Wuhan in Hubei province of China in December 2019. Total cases as on now are more than 100 million in world and more than 10 million in our country. The case fatality rate in world is 2.14% and in India is 1.44%. Transmission, as we all know, is through droplets, contact, aerosols. The carriers can be symptomatic or asymptomatic. Asymptomatic are also known as super spreaders. Now coming on to the timeline of the disease. On 1st December 2019, first case was reported from Wuhan, China. On 31st December 2019, there were the cluster of cases and there was an outbreak reported from Wuhan, China. On 7th January, coronavirus was identified as the causative agent. On 30th January, WHO declared it as public health emergency. Also on 30th January, there was first case in India. On 11th of Feb, the terms COVID-19 came for the disease and SARS-CoV-2 came for the causative organism. On 11th March of 2020, COVID was declared as pandemic by WHO. And recently on 16 January 2021, first drive of vaccine. This is for India. First drive of vaccine in India, covering frontline healthcare workers and other population. Now seeing this graph, this tells the situation in India. The peak in India was around mid of September, where we reported as large as up to 98,000 cases per day. Now the disease is on decline. Coming on to the structure of virus. The virus has envelope protein, the membrane known as membrane protein. From the membrane there are some spikes known as spike glycoprotein, and finally there is protein attached to the RNA known as nucleoprotein. So there is S protein, M protein, N protein and E protein. These all are responsible for the virulence of the virus. Now talking about the S protein is a homotrimer. This is the membrane and this is the spike. It is a homotrimer. It has 3 parts. It is further divided into 2 parts, that is S1 and S2. S1 is the hydrophilic part. So there is another protein which is lodged in between the membrane, which actually is a enzyme. This enzyme is known as HE, which is hemagglutinin esterase, which breaks the hemagglutinin bonds. Now talking about the pathogenesis of the virus with the help of spike glycoprotein attaches to the host cell with the help of ACE2 receptor. But this ACE2 receptor is not mandatory for viral entry. It can also enter directly through endocytosis. The ACE2 receptors is sometimes facilitated by an enzyme known as TMPRSS2. So it can enter through ACE2 receptors, which is sometimes facilitated by TMPRSS2, or it can directly enter through the help of endocytosis. Now talking about the genome of the virus, it has a RNA bound to nucleoprotein in a coiled fashion, which is beads on a string pattern. Beads of string pattern. Now talking about the RNA of the virus, it is single-stranded positive sense RNA. Now, when the virus enters the host cell either through ACE2 receptor or through endocytosis, the capsid of the virus remains outside the host cell. Only the nuclear material, that is genome, enters inside the cell. Now, this RNA has to do 2 things. First, it has to make multiple RNAs for further replication of the virus, and also it has to make the structural proteins like envelope protein, spike protein, membrane protein, so that the nuclear material can be assembled with these proteins to make the viral virion. For this, the ssRNA first makes a complementary copy of negative RNA, negative stranded single-stranded RNA, negative sense single-stranded RNA, and also it can directly form protein with the help of ribosomes. If it is forming single-stranded negative RNA, this can act as a primer. This negative sense RNA can act as a primer and further can form single-stranded positive sense RNA, which can be incorporated along with the proteins to form virus, which is finally released from the host cell. Now let's go into detail how this viral replication and these things happen. Let's see. This is the SARS-CoV-2. It can either go directly through endocytosis or can go with the help of ACE2 receptors. These ACE2 receptors are sometimes facilitated by TMPRS2 enzyme, which is a serine protease enzyme. When the virus particle attaches to the host cell, the nuclear material goes inside and the capsid remains outside. It can either go with two paths. It can either form the proteins like E protein, S protein, M protein, or it can form further RNA. This is known as genomic RNA application. Finally, the protein synthesis will occur in endoplasmic reticulum. The folding of the proteins will occur in Golgi apparatus, and the assembly of mature virion will occur in cytoplasm. This is very important, that the protein synthesis will, as other viruses, will occur in endoplasmic reticulum. Folding will occur in Golgi body, and the assembly of the viral virion will occur in cytoplasm. Finally, the virus is released from the cell after multiplication. So after we have seen the pathogenesis of the virus, let's see what are the lung changes in cases of COVID-19. In microscopy, we can have diffuse alveolar damage, which is a feature of ARDS, thick alveolar septa, which is due to hyalinization of the alveolar septa, proliferation of type 2 pneumocytes, lymphocyte accumulation, and multinucleate giant cells. These multinucleate giant cells confirm this pathology to be of viral etiology. Let's check out all these features. This is the gross specimen of lung, which has shown infarcts after the postmortem of this patient, and the microscopic features are showing this white clear space is alveolar. This is air in the alveoli. This is the thickening of alveolar septa due to hyalinization. This image here is showing multinucleate giant cells and lymphocyte accumulation. Now coming on to the clinical features of disease, the most common symptom is fever, followed by dry cough, myalgia, and shortness of breath. Fever is seen in 81% of cases. According to the severity, 80% cases land into mild severity, 15% are moderate to severe. These require admission in HDU, which is high dependency unit. 5% patients are critical, and severe to critical patients can be admitted in ICU. Severe cases are characterized by type 1 respiratory failure, hypotensive shock, and multi-organ failure. Now discussing some basic definitions. ILI is defined as acute respiratory infection with fever, cough. Fever should be more than 38 degrees centigrade or 100.4 degree Fahrenheit with an onset within last 10 days. ILI is fever, cough with onset in last 10 days. If there is a need of hospitalization in an ILI patient, this becomes case of SARI, severe acute respiratory infection. Respiratory failure represents the failure of lung to maintain adequate gas exchange. It is characterized by if the ABG is showing PaO2 less than 60 milliliter mercury, either alone or along with the hypercarbia. Hypercarbia is PaCO2 more than 46 milliliter of mercury. So respiratory failure is denoted by PaO2 less than 16 with or without PaCO2 more than 46. In this case, pH will become less than 7.3. How can we identify a high risk patient? For example, if a patient comes out to be positive, so what are the likely chances that he will end up in severe or critical illness? Or what are the chances that he will end up into mild illness? So what are the features of high risk patient who can go to severe or critical conditions? These are according to comorbidities, according to clinical features which can be identified clinically, or according to the lab values. First, we will see according to comorbidities. Age more than 50, history of ischemic heart disease, diabetes, hypertension. If the patient is obese, have lung diseases in past like COPD, bronchial asthma, post-tubercular, chronic kidney disease, chronic liver disease, immunosuppressed patient or a patient of HIV, or the patient having malignancy. These are all high-risk patients for COVID-19. Clinically, if the patient is having SpO2 less than 94%, tachycardia more than 100 per minute, respiratory distress with a rate of more than 30, hypotension with systolic BP less than 90, and altered sensorium. This is also a high-risk patient clinically. And if we talk about lab values, if there is lymphopenia with NL ratio more than 17, NL ratio is very important, that is neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio. Usually, like every other viral illness, COVID-19 also shows lymphopenia because of bone marrow depression. So, the NL ratio more than 70 is a high risk patient. If the CRP is more than 100 milligram per liter, or serum ferritin is more than 100, LDH more than 450, or D-dimer more than 1000 nanogram per ml. These all bring to the diagnosis of high risk patient. Now, to avoid the wastage of resources and manpower, the disease has been clinically divided into categories. Let's have a look. If a person is tested RT-PCR positive for COVID, then he can fall into one of the following categories. Either the patient can be asymptomatic. He will have no symptoms and the parameters will be absolutely normal. SpO2 more than 94% room air, respiratory rate less than 24, and there is no evidence of hypoxemia or breathlessness. The patient can fall into category of mild illness, which is seen in 80% of cases. In this case, there will be uncomplicated URTI, just upper respiratory tract infection symptoms will be there. And when we check the parameters, SpO2 will be normal, respiratory rate also normal, less than 24. There will be no evidence of hypoxemia or breathlessness. The patient can fall into moderate or severe categories, which can be seen in 15% cases. Moderate is defined by pneumonia without any signs of severe disease. In moderate illness, the SpO2 will range from 90 to 94% and respiratory rate will be 24 to 30 per minute. In severe illness, the signs of severe illness are SpO2 when it is falling less than 90% on room air, or respiratory rate if goes above 30 per minute. Then it is severe illness. Critical illness has two parts. Critical illness can be seen in 5% cases of COVID-19 and they require ICU care. These can be characterized by either ARDS or septic shock. ARDS can be mild, moderate or severe according to PF ratio, PaO2 upon FiO2. ARDS has an onset of new or worsening respiratory symptoms within 1 week. This is the definition of ARDS. Within 1 week of known clinical insult, chest imaging should show bilateral opacities which are not fully explained by effusions, collapse or nodules. The origin of pulmonary infiltrates leads to respiratory failure which is not explained by any cardiac failure or fluid overload. On the other hand, septic shock is defined in adults persisting hypotension despite giving volume resuscitation and requiring vasopressors to maintain the mean arterial pressure of more than equal to 65 mm of mercury and serum lactate more than 2 millimole per liter. This serum lactate more than 2 millimole is the definition of sepsis. So clinical categories can be asymptomatic. If at all the patient is symptomatic, he can be mild, moderate, severe or critical. Mild illness is seen in 80% cases, moderate is seen in 50%, and severe, moderate to severe 15%, and critical illness in 5% cases. So this is a very important chart and many questions can be framed from this chart itself. We have to keep in mind all the SpO2 parameters according to the clinical category. In moderate, the SpO2 is 94 to 90% and our respiratory rate is 24 to 30, and severe it falls below 90% and respiratory rate more than 30. Now friends, we'll learn with the help of examples how will we proceed when a COVID patient comes to us. In first case, let's take a 50-year-old male who is having cough and fever since 5 days, and on examination the SpO2 is 97% and respiratory rate is 22%. He will be admitted to a CCC, COVID Care Center, or can be advised home quarantine. At the time of admission, we will send a CBC that will also denote the neutrophil lymphocyte ratio. Take RBS. If the RBS is high or the patient has history of diabetes, we will send HbA1c, do a ECG. If we are planning to give him favipiravir, we will send RFT, serum electrolytes, serum uric acid and D-dimers. Now on the next day, do we need any repeat test? No. We do not need any daily repetition of test. After 3 days or 72 hours, if the initial D-dimer has come to be high, then we will repeat D-dimer after 72 hours. At the time of discharge, no test is required. We can discharge the patient. If all investigations are normal, we can discharge him without any investigation. Now, in second case, let's take a patient, 35-year-old female with a history of bronchial asthma, SpO2 92% and respiratory rate of 28. She will be admitted to DCHC, that is Dedicated COVID Health Center. At the time of admission, along with all these investigations which we have sent in mild case like CBC, RBS, HbA1c if diabetic, ECG, RFT, serum electrolyte, uric acid, we will also send LFT. Inflammatory markers will include IL-6, ferritin, CRP, TROP-I, etc. Coagulation profile will include PT, APTT, D-dimer. We'll do ABG, also send serum LDH. If the total count has come to be high in CBC, we'll send blood culture, serum cortisol, chest X-ray is essential. If available, we have to go for CT thorax, planned 2D echo and COVID antibody IgM IgG test if available. This is important to note that in mild cases, we are not doing any chest X-ray. On the next day, we will repeat the investigations CBC, LFT, RFT, ABG. These investigations have to be repeated daily in cases of moderate illness. After 72 hours, we will repeat the inflammatory markers like CRP, ferritin, and in coagulation profile, we will not repeat whole coagulation profile. We will send just D-dimer. We'll send serum LDH and repeat X-ray. At the time of discharge, again, all these investigations need to be repeated. Now, if a 75-year-old female come to you and having SpO2 86%, respiratory rate 32, she will be admitted to dedicated COVID hospital, and if she is critical, then she will require ICU care. Along with all the investigations we have done in moderate cases, we will also do serum magnesium, serum calcium, anti-proBNP, which is a marker of heart failure, high sensitivity CRP, and serum lactate. Just like moderate illness, we have to repeat CBC, LFT, RFT, ABG daily. And after 72 hours, we'll repeat all these investigations, just like moderate illness, CRP, serum ferritin, D-dimer, serum LDH. At discharge also, same protocol is like moderate illness, but if required, we can also send repeat RT-PCR. So repeat RT-PCR testing is only and only required in severe or critical illness. So friends, this is a very important chart from which multiple MCQs can be formulated. Going to the next part. What are the laboratory findings in cases of COVID-19? There is a lymphopenia with increase in NL ratio, raised CRP, raised LDH. There is a raise in direct bilirubin level. We can find leukopenia in more than 1/3 cases. IL-6 can be increased ferritin can be there. This can be diagnostic of cytokine storm. Cytokine storm is a hyper-exaggerated response of the body against the pathogen. The response is so exaggerated that it starts destroying, and it is harmful for our body only. Procalcitonin will be decreased in COVID-19. If it is increasing, it denotes secondary bacterial infection. The role of procalcitonin investigation is not a very big role, but it can just tell us whether the counts are raising because of the cytokine storm or due to the secondary bacterial infection. If procalcitonin is increased, then we have to escalate our antibiotics. Now, since COVID is a hypercoagulable state, it is seen that there is increased D-dimers. These are the fibrinogen degradation products. These are known as D-dimers. There will be increased D-dimers more than 1000 nanogram per ml. Now talking about the investigations, the foremost is RRT-PCR. This is real-time reverse transcriptase PCR. The sample, if the patient has only upper respiratory tract infection, can be taken from nasal swab, throat swab, or nasal lavage fluid. If the patient has LRTI, sample can be sputum or bronchoalveolar lavage fluid. Bronchoscopy is least preferred because it will have high risk of transmission. But in cases of intubated patients on mechanical ventilator, we have to take the sample with due precautions and proper PPE kit and face shield. Appropriate PPE kit we have to wear, and this is a very important point, that sample should be taken only with latex-free purple nitrile gloves. Latex-free purple nitrile gloves. We should not use latex gloves. We have to tilt the patient to 70 degree back and take the sample. What is the swab used? We have to use a synthetic fiber swab having a plastic shaft. Do not use calcium alginate swab or swab with wooden shaft. From where we have to take the sample, we have to touch tonsillar pillar and posterior oropharynx. Avoid touching tongue, teeth and gums. We have to not touch tongue, teeth and gums. How we will transport the sample? The sample is immediately mixed with viral transport media in the RT-PCR vials, and it should be transported on ice. Now talking about IgM antibody assay, the sample is taken from the blood or serum. It is based on lateral flow immunochromatographic assay. Results are available within 15 minutes, and 10 microliter of plasma and 1 drop of blood is enough for giving the results. Government has also involved rapid antigen test, in which the sample is taken from, similar to RT-PCR, nasal swab and throat swab, and the results are available within 10 to 15 minutes. Nucleic acid amplification test, TrueNAT, was also done, which is based on nucleic acid amplification. Now let's have a look at the serology of the viral infection. When the virus infects the body, after the incubation period, there is symptomatic phase. If this X is denoting days 5, 7, 14, 21, 28, this red line denotes levels of SARS-CoV-2 RNA levels. This will start increasing and will have a peak on 14th day, after which the RNA levels start falling. The IgM, which is denoted by blue, starts rising near about 7 days, takes a peak on 14 days along with RNA, and then starts declining. Talking about the window period will be there when no antibody will be available in the blood or detectable in the blood. So window period is between 0 to 7 days. 0 to 7 days. This is the window period. 7 days. This is the window period. Talking about IgG, which is denoted in green, the IgG will start increasing from day 14, will have a peak at about day 28, and then slightly decline and reach to a plateau. It is important to note that the recovery begins as soon as the RNA levels start falling. The RNA levels start falling after 14 days. So recovery begins after 14 days, and after 21 days, when the IgG levels start increasing and the recovery is still going on, this phase is known as convalescence. It is important to note that in recovery phase and convalescent phase, the patient can still be infective. Although the viral load declines a lot, but patient can still transmit the disease. Now, from the graph we have seen, we'll try to answer these questions. If the patient has tested RT-PCR positive, but the IgM antibodies as well as IgG is negative, then it will be denoting window period. If the RT-PCR as well as IgM antibody is positive but IgG is negative, it will denote early infection. All three tests are positive, it will denote active infection. If the RT-PCR is negative but IgM antibodies are coming positive and IgG is negative, in this case there will be early infection with false negative RT-PCR. So in this case, the RT-PCR is falsely negative. It can be falsely negative in many cases, and we have seen that many patients are false negative RT-PCR. The fifth is the best scenario. RT-PCR is negative, IgM is negative, IgG is positive. Recovered infection in the past recovered infection. Now coming on to a very important part of this lecture, and questions can be asked from this. This is CORADS. The full form of CORADS is COVID-19 Reporting and Data System. It shows the level of suspicion. Courates only signifies the level of suspicion. It do not indicate the severity. For example, if a patient is having higher Courette score up to 5, then we cannot say that the patient is very serious. He can be either in mild or moderate illness, but can have a score of Courette's 5 or 6. For severity, we have CT Severity Index, which is a scoring system based on the lobes. What has to be seen in a CT? These are the peripheral ground glass opacities. The subjective observation, which depends on the radiologist. This has to be reported in Courettes. So more the suspicion is there and more the ground glass opacities or opacifications are there, the higher is the score given to that CT scan. So let's see the Courette's system. The score can be from Courette 0 till Courette 6. In Courette 0, the CT scan is not interpretable because there was an improper scan. In Courette's 1, very low or no suspicion of COVID-19. CT findings are either normal of a healthy normal individual or the abnormalities there which is non-infectious. Courette's 2 is low suspicion. Abnormalities are consistent with infection but not due to COVID-19. Infection is there but not due to COVID-19. Means this ground glass opacities, other things are not there. Courette's 3 has an intermediate suspicion level and the findings are equivocal. Courette's 4 has a high level of suspicion. It is highly suspicious of COVID-19. Courette's 5 denotes very high level of suspicion with all the typical COVID-19 findings. And Courette's 6 when the patient is RT-PCR positive, irrespective of the CT findings. So, in Courette's 5, the typical COVID-19 findings which are seen are ground glass opacities, which are multifocal, usually bilateral, involving both lobes, having crazy paving appearance, having crazy paving pattern. Now in Courette's imaging system, we have a severity index known as CT Severity Index. CT Severity Index, which is used to denote the severity, how severe is the infection. The Courette's was to tell the suspicion of infection, but severity index will tell the severity. In this, we take 5 lobes. The right lung has 3 lobes and the left lung has 2 lobes. The all 5 lungs are given score between 1 to 5 individually. What are these scores? Score 1 is 5% infected lung, score lobe 5% infected lobe. Score 2 is 5 to 25% infected lobe. Score 3 is 25 to 50% infected lobe. Score 4 50 to 75, and if it is more than 75 it is score 5. This score is calculated for each lobe and it is summed up. For example, this right upper lobe is involved 50%, so 45% for example, we will give a score 3. This right middle lobe is involved 30%, we will give a score 3. This right lower lobe is infected, involved 60%, we will give a score 4. If left upper lobe involved 20%, we will give a score of 2. And left lower lobe involved 55%, we will give a score of 4. So we have to sum all these. 3 plus 2 plus 3, 3 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 4. This comes out to be 6 plus 2, 8, 12 and 16. So the total score is given out of 25. In this case, our patient has a score of 16. So the report will say if the features are typical COVID-19, the report will say CORADS 5 with a CT severity of 16/25, which is severe. How it is severe? So this is the severity. If the total score is less than 8, it is mild illness. If 9 to 15, it is moderate, and more than 15 denotes severe illness. So guys, this is a very important topic, CORAD scoring for COVID-19, and many questions can be framed from this topic. Coming to the treatment part, we'll discuss the treatment in all the categories at the same time. So we will discuss for all mild, moderate, severe or critical categories. First, we will see what is the role of antivirals. In mild category, if the patient is admitted in COVID care center or is in home isolation, he or she is advised to take tablet hydroxychloroquine HCQS, the dose being 400 mg BD for first day, followed by 200 mg BD for next 4 days. Total 5 days we have to give. On first day 400 mg BD, on next 4 days 200 mg BD. Or if the hydroxychloroquine is given in COVID care center home isolation, if the patient is in DCHC, then we can give tablet favipiravir. The dose of favipiravir is very important. It is given for 7 days. Total 7 days on first day and next 6 days. On first day, the dose is 1800 mg BD. 1800 mg BD, and from second to sixth day, second to seventh day, total 6 days, the dose is 800 mg BD. Total 7 days we have to give. On day 1 it is 1800 mg BD, and from day 2 to day 7 it is 800 mg BD. If the tablet hydroxychloroquine or tablet favipiravir is contraindicated, we will later see the contraindications for both. Then we will give a combination of doxycycline and ivermectin. Doxycycline is given 100 mg BD for 5 days, and ivermectin is given 12 mg OD for 3 days. In moderate illness, we have to give a very important and novel drug, remdesivir. It is given for total 5 days. On first day, the dose is 200 mg IV. From day 2 onwards till day 5, the dose is 100 mg IV. It is given in 100 ml NS. If remdesivir is not available to start, then we can simply give hydroxychloroquine in the same dose. That is 400 mg BD for one day, followed by 200 mg BD for next 4 days, total 5 days. It is important to note that we should not co-administer remdesivir with hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine. It is a very important point. For severe and critical cases, if the remdesivir have not been given in the previous stage, we will first give the remdesivir. Then, if the patient is not improving, we will give injection tocilizumab. It is only given in very high centers. The dose being 8 mg per kg with maximum dose 800 mg at one time. It is also given slowly in 100 ml NS over 1 hour. Dose can be repeated once after 12 to 24 hours if needed. So it is given at a dose of 8 mg per kg, maximum 800 mg can be repeated after 12 to 24 hours. Or we can also give similar drug itolizumab with dose 1.6 milligram per kg and subsequent weekly dose being 0.8 milligram per kg over 4 hours. It is important to note that we have to give capsule oseltamivir 75 milligram BD for 5 days in patients of all categories. So all these patients will receive, even if it is mild, moderate or severe, it will receive oseltamivir if there is any superadded or superadded influenza. Now, second important part of the treatment is oxygen therapy. Since mild patients are vitally stable, they will not require oxygen. The moderate patients with SpO2 less than 94 or respiratory rate 24 to 30, these will be started oxygen on nasal prongs at 2 to 5 liter per minute or face mask 5 liter up to 5 liters per minute. If the oxygen requirement is 2 to 5 liter, then we will give nasal prongs. If it is more than equal to 5 liter, then we will give face mask. Awake proning is advised whenever possible. If the patient is severe or critical, we start with oxygen face mask or NRBM mask. NRBM mask we will see later, non-rebreathing mask. If he do not respond to this, then we will start high flow nasal cannula oxygenation or non-invasive ventilation based on PaO2 upon FiO2 ratio. If the patient also deteriorates after this also and repeat AVG after 6 hours suggests worsening of oxygenation, then we will plan early intubation and follow ARDS NET protocol. Prone ventilation is advised in this case also. Coming on to antibacterials. Antibacterials are usually not needed in mild illness. In moderate illness, if the antibiogram shows any specific organism or antibiotic, we can give that antibiotic. In severe or critical illness, we start ceftriaxone 1 gram BD empirically. We will start in all the cases, and it can be escalated according to the blood culture or any other culture if available. Other therapies which can be given in moderate cases is convalescent plasma therapy, the dose being 4 to 13 ml per kg. Usually 200 ml single dose is given slowly over 2 hours. In severe critical cases, we can give Sepsivac 0.3 ml intradermal once a day for 3 days. Sepsivac is a immunomodulator which is made of mycobacterial antigens. It has mycobacterial antigens and act as an immunomodulator and enhances the immunity of the body. Now let's discuss the various drugs. First of all, most important, hydroxychloroquine. The mechanism of action is it acts as an immunomodulator. Therefore, it has also been used in autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis. Additionally, it has action of inhibition of enzyme heme polymerase, which gives it additional antiviral activity. The contraindications are very important to remember. The contraindications of hydroxychloroquine as follows: QT interval more than 480 milliseconds. If it is given, then it can lead to torsades de pointes. Any pre-existing cardiomyopathy or cardiac rhythm disorders, history of unexplained syncope, retinopathy, hypersensitivity to hydroxychloroquine or 4-aminoquinoline compounds, G6PD deficiency, history of epilepsy and hypokalemia with potassium less than 3 milliequivalent. These all are the contraindications of the hydroxychloroquine. Now coming on to the next drug, that is favipiravir. Favipiravir is a RNA polymerase inhibitor. It is RNA polymerase inhibitor. It is only used as a part of clinical research after due clearance from Institutional Ethical Committee. The randomized controlled trials in Russia and non-randomized controlled trials in China has showed significant hastened viral clearance. मतलब there is increased and fast viral clearance if we are giving favipiravir. Contraindications are hyperuricemia, severe hepatic and renal impairment. Therefore, we have seen that if we are giving favipiravir in mild cases, we have to test RFT. Pregnant and lactating mothers, favipiravir is contraindicated. Coming on to a very novel drug and very important and life-saving drug, it is remdesivir. It is given in moderate to severe cases. It is not given in mild cases. First point, it is not given in mild cases. It is only given in moderate to severe cases of COVID-19 only when there are increasing needs of oxygen, which is more than 5 liters per minute, for maintaining oxygen saturation more than 95%. It is a adenosine nucleotide analog product. The mechanism of action is adenosine nucleotide analog product. The dose we have seen 200 mg on day 1 followed by 100 mg for 4 days. Total 5 days the course is there. Contraindications are very important. AST, ALT more than 5 times the upper limit. Therefore, we have seen we have to do LFT on first day to plan remdesivir. Severe renal impairment with eGFR less than 30 or need of hemodialysis, this drug cannot be given. Pregnancy or lactating females, we do not give this drug. Children less than 12 years of age, this drug is contraindicated. Now talking about convalescent plasma therapy. ICMR has suggested its off-label use in COVID-19 patients. What is the donor criteria? Who can donate plasma? The individual should be more than 18 years age. He should be male or either nulliparous female, weight more than 55 kg, prior RT-PCR positive with symptomatic disease, complete resolution of symptoms which has 28 days prior to donation or 14 days prior with 2 RT-PCR negative, consequently 24 hours apart, neutralizing titer above the threshold of or IgG more than 1:640. Who cannot give the donate plasma? What is the exclusion criteria? If there are any transfusion in last 8 weeks or COVID positive for 4 months or more, these cannot give the plasma. Now the recipient criteria, this is also very important. The patient who has to receive the convalescent plasma therapy should be RT-PCR positive, age should be more than 18, PaO2 upon FiO2 ratio should be 200 to 300. This is mild ARDS. Respiratory rate more than 24 with SpO2 less than 93% on room air. There should be availability of cross-match donor. Only if the cross-match donor is there, we can give the plasma. It is not given in pregnant, breastfeeding, patients having hypersensitive blood products, recipient of pooled IG in last 30 days, IgA deficiency or immunoglobulin allergy. Dose is 4 to 13 ml per kg. Usually a 200 ml bag is given in 2 hours. Subsequent dose can be given after 2 days. A repeat dose can be given after 2 days, which is usually from a different donor. Side effects can be, since convalescent plasma has antibodies against the COVID-19, sometimes it can lead to antibody mediated enhancement of the COVID-19. The infection becomes more severe due to antibody mediated enhancement, and transfusion related disease transmission can be there as seen with other blood products. Now discussing about tocilizumab, it is also used off-labelly just like plasma. It is a anti-IL-6 drug which is useful if the patient undergoes cytokine storm. If the moderate COVID-19 infection patient have progressively increasing oxygen requirement or the patient is on mechanical ventilation, serum procalcitonin should be done before giving tocilizumab. Serum procalcitonin denotes secondary bacterial infection and it can differentiate between bacterial infection and cytokine storm. In cytokine storm, there will be raised IL-6 CRP ferritin, and in secondary bacterial infection, there will be raised procalcitonin. If the serum procalcitonin is more than 2 nanogram per ml, it is a strict contraindication for giving tocilizumab. Since tocilizumab has many side effects and it can be very harmful if we give it in patients of secondary bacterial infection. It is considered as double-edged sword. The side effects are bone marrow suppression, superadded infections, gastrointestinal perforation, or in long term it can also lead to lung fibrosis. Now let's discuss in brief some basics of oxygen therapy for COVID-19. There can be two types of devices: variable performance devices and fixed performance devices. In variable performance devices, the FiO2 is variable. FiO2 is variable. Also, the FiO2 is variable according to the oxygen flow and also depends on the respiratory demand of the patient. The FiO2 in these cases decreases as the respiratory rate of the patient increases. So these are variable performance devices having no capacity like nasal catheters or cannula, small capacity like simple face mask, large capacity devices are mask with bag. Fixed performance devices delivering fixed FiO2 is Venturi mask, high flow nasal cannula, anesthesia circuits and ventilators. Out of this, nasal cannula, catheters and masks are low flow devices, and large capacity mask with bag that are partial rebreathing mask or non-rebreathing mask, along with all the fixed performance devices are high flow devices. Coming to the next slide, we will discuss some salient features regarding nasal prong. This is the nasal prong. It is used for delivering oxygen 126 liters per minute. It delivers variable FiO2 with a formula of 20 plus 4 into rate of oxygen delivery, which can be variable from 24 to 44. So it can deliver almost 0.4 of maximum FiO2. The advantage is that patient can speak easily, eat food, drink, everything can be done, and the nasal cannula has not to be removed during the eating or drinking water, etc. This is second one is simple face mask. The simple face mask deliver FiO2, deliver oxygen at 6 to 10 liters per minute with maximum FiO2 of 60% or 0.6. If we have to increase the FiO2, then we have the option of rebreathing masks. These can be either partial rebreathing mask or non-rebreathing mask. We cannot go in details. If you want a detailed lecture, just comment me. I will make a detailed lecture on oxygen therapy. We can discuss the details there. In partial rebreathing mask, oxygen can be delivered at 6 to 10 liters per minute, but in this case the FiO2 can be increased from 0.6% to 0.8%. This is the advantage of partial rebreathing mask. In non-rebreathing mask, the oxygen is delivered at 10 to 15 liters per minute, and theoretically it can deliver FiO2 up to 1, that is 100%. But practically it delivers 0.8 only, that is 80%. Now coming to high flow nasal cannula. This is the picture showing high flow nasal oxygenation device. In this, there is a water chamber which helps in the humidification of the air and gives out hot air at a flow rate up to 60 liters per minute. This can give a flow rate up to 60 liters per minute with a FiO2 100%. And the important point is that it also generates PEEP, positive end expiratory pressure, therefore recruits more alveoli. This is the nasal cannula which is used with high flow nasal device. This is a very big cannula, so sometimes it is very discomforting for the patient, and it gives continuous high pressure hot air, hot humidified air. This is a BiPAP mask, bi-level positive airway pressure ventilation, also known as non-invasive ventilation. This is also used in the settings in ARDS in cases of COVID-19 patient. Now this is the flow chart table denoting FiO2 at various flow rates by various devices. Nasal cannula can deliver 1 to 6 liters oxygen with FiO2 24 to 44%. Oxygen mask can give 5 to 8 liters oxygen with 40 to 60% FiO2. Mask with reservoir bag can give up to 60 to 82% FiO2. Up to 100% FiO2 can be delivered by an NRBM, and it can deliver up to 15 liters. Venturi mask has fixed devices, and at various oxygen flow rate, these give fixed FiO2. Now friends, let's see what is the importance of prone positioning during ventilation. It improves the oxygenation, it improves the respiratory mechanics, it homogenizes the pleural pressure gradient, increases the lung volume, reduce the amount of atelectic areas of lungs, facilitates drainage of secretions, reduces ventilator associated lung injury. What are the typical protocols for prone positioning? It includes 30 to 120 minutes in prone position, followed by 30 to 120 minutes in left lateral decubitus, then right lateral decubitus, and upright sitting position. This means the COVID patient should be in supine position as little as possible. He should be changing his position every now and then. Proning as much as possible is beneficial up to 16 to 18 hours per day. Now let's see in brief the protocol of oxygen therapy. First, we will start the patient on nasal cannula or prongs at 1 to 4 liters per minute. If the patient has improved and maintaining saturation, we will slowly wean off the patient from oxygen. Weaning off means decreasing oxygen slowly after observing for 1 to 2 hours. Even after 1 hour of prongs or cannula, the patient is not improving, then we will shift the patient to mask at 5 liters per minute. If improved, then we will wean again to nasal prongs. If on face mask also, if the patient is not improving, then we will give face mask with reservoir bag, which will deliver FiO2 ranging from 0.6 to 1, practically 0.6 to 0.9 at 10 to 15 liters per minute. If after 1 to 2 hours patient is not improving, then we will shift the patient to high flow nasal oxygenation, then non-invasive ventilation, that is bi-level positive airway ventilation, and finally if the patient is not improving from BiPAP also, then we will start mechanical ventilation by intubation. The tidal volume should be kept low according to the ARDS NET protocol. The improvement is suggested by SpO2 more than 92%, PaO2 in ABG is 80 to 100 milliliter of mercury, and respiratory rate 24 to 30 per minute. For details of ABG analysis, you can watch my lecture with a link being shown here. Now, after we have discussed all the antiviral drugs, convalescent plasma, then tocilizumab, oxygen therapy. There is a role of anticoagulation. Anticoagulation. There is a very important role of steroids and supportive management. Talking about anticoagulation, anticoagulation is required because COVID-19, as shown in studies, is a hypercoagulable state and prothrombotic state. So it leads to infarcts in various organs of the body like lung, brain, as well as cardiovascular system. Uh, Anticoagulation will be done in all the three cases: mild, moderate, severe, or critical illness. But in mild cases, it is given only when the D dimer is more than 1000 nanogram per ml. That means D dimer is raised, or X-ray or CT thorax is showing ground glass opacity. In mild cases, we will give low molecular weight heparin, which is enoxaparin, 40 milligram subcutaneous OD for 7 days. Okay. In moderate illness, we will again give enoxaparin 40 milligram subcutaneous OD for 7 days. But if the patient of moderate illness is having weight more than 65, we will switch to 60 milligram BD. 60 milligram BD. Total dose being 120 for 7 days. In severe or critical patients, we have to give enoxaparin according to the weight, which is 1 milligram per kg weight in divided doses BD for 7 days. In all three cases, we have to give the anticoagulation for 7 days. The alternative for enoxaparin is, if the low molecular weight heparin is not present, then we can also give IV heparin 5000 international unit BD for 7 days. Coming to steroids, in mild cases, steroids are not given. In mild cases, steroids are not given. This is very important point. In moderate cases, 2 steroids can be given, which can be methylprednisolone or dexamethasone. The dose for methylprednisolone in moderate cases 0.5 to 1 milligram per kg. The dose for methylprednisolone in severe critical cases is just double, 1 to 2 milligram per kg. The DEXA dose is 0.1 to 0.2 milligram per kg for moderate cases, and it is again double, 0.2 to 0.4 milligram per kg for severe or critical cases. In moderate cases, it is given for 3 to 5 days. In severe critical cases, it is given for 5 to 7 days. So steroid not given in mild cases. Moderate, we have seen the dose, almost double everything for severe to critical cases, that is methylpred 1 to 2, dexamethasone 0.2 to 0.4, and 3 to 5 days is replaced by 5 to 7 days. Supportives, what is the role of supportives? Zinc, vitamin C, these are given because these are used to improve the immunity and the protective power of the body. Tablet zinc 50 milligram is given OD for 7 days in all the three categories. Vitamin C 500 milligram TDS is given in mild to moderate cases, and for severe cases it is given 1.5 gram 6 hourly for 5 days. 1.5 gram 6 hourly for 5 days. On the other hand, it was 7 days for mild to moderate. So 1.5 gram comes out to be 6 gram daily for 5 days. So it is a very large amount, and it is given IV. If the patients are having cough in all three cases, we can add tablet N-acetylcysteine 600 milligram TDS. Now let's discuss a very important image which shows the stages of the infection. The stage 1 is early infection, which is confined to the upper respiratory tract, and the patients usually have only mild illness or are asymptomatic. The second stage is pulmonary phase. The virus enters the lungs, and now the patients have started having difficulty in breathing. The third stage is the response of the body, that is hyperinflammatory phase. In the initial stages, the viral response is at a higher side and viral replication occurs. Soon as we proceed towards stage 2 and stage 3, there is initiation of host inflammatory response. The host inflammation increases, IL-6, ferritin levels increases, CRP increases, and this denotes increase in host inflammatory response. So what are the various drugs used in various phases? As soon as the patient starts having mild illness or tested positive and is asymptomatic, we start hydroxychloroquine along with zinc. It is very important to note that remdesivir and convalescent plasma should be given as early as possible since these are against the virus. These should be given preferably in stage 2, that is pulmonary phase, when the virus has most marked activity in the lungs. Anti-IL-6 therapies like tocilizumab is required in stage 3, in which there is hyperinflammation due to host inflammatory response. Corticosteroids and anticoagulation should go on from stage 2 till the end of the infection, and oxygen therapy is also initiated from stage 2 and goes on till the end of the infection. Now, very important part, let's discuss the prevention part. The preventive measures we all know very well, that is social distancing of 6 feet, N95 mask wearing by healthcare professionals and triple layered mask by general population. N95 mask filters 95% of particles of more than 3 micron size. N99 mask filters 99% of particles of more than 0.3 micron size. This is very important that it filters particles above 0.3 micron. Alcohol based sanitizers should contain at least 60% alcohol for prevention against COVID. 60% alcohol is virucidal. PPE kit with proper gown, gloves, mask, shoe cover, goggles should be there. Now let's discuss about FFP mask, that is filtering face piece mask or respirator mask. This can be of 3 types: FFP1, FFP2 and FFP3. When we talk about filter penetration limit, the FFP1 filters 80% of airborne particles, 2 filters 94% and 3 filters 99% of airborne particles. And this is a leakage in various FFP masks. The band color can show us which FFP mask is there. If the mask has yellow bands, then it is FFP1, blue or white bands it is FFP2, and red band mask is FFP3 mask. Coming on to the most important part of this presentation are the vaccines, which are recently introduced, and the first vaccination drive has started from 16th January. The vaccines can be RNA based vaccines, for example Pfizer BioNTech and Moderna vaccine. Vaccine can be protein subunit like Novavax and Chinese AOS vaccine. Vaccine can be viral vector based like Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which is marketed as Covishield in India, CanSino vaccine, Janssen, Gamaleya RI and Sputnik V vaccine. Whole virus inactivated vaccine like Sinovac, Sinopharm 2, Biotech, which is marketed as Bharat Biotech, which is Covaxin in India, and Medicago Inc. We will discuss 4 important vaccines, that is Covishield, Covaxin in India, and Pfizer BioNTech and Moderna vaccine, which is used worldwide. Let's start with Covishield. The Covishield vaccine is developed by Serum Institute of India. Serum Institute of India in association with Oxford AstraZeneca company. The name of the vaccine is ChAd-OX1 and CoV-19, and it is also known as AZD1222. It is a viral vector based vaccine. The cell line which is used to make this vaccine is HEC293 cells. The antigen which is used in this vaccine is S-glycoprotein of SARS-CoV-2, which we have discussed the morphology of the virus. So the S-glycoprotein, which is the homotrimer, is used. It is given in more than equal to 18 years of age in 2 doses, which is 0.5 ml each, 4 weeks apart. Route is intramuscular, given preferably in deltoid. The duration and level of protection is still unknown. The protective efficacy of 2 doses is around 70%. Cold chain temperature, as other vaccines required, is 2 to 8 degrees centigrade. After opening the vial, it should be used as soon as possible within 6 hours and should be kept between 2 to 25 degrees centigrade. Each vial contains 5 ml of vaccine, therefore 10 doses. The contraindications are age less than 18 years, hypersensitivity to previous dose, pregnancy and lactation. Precautions are if patient is having hypersensitivity, any other concurrent illness, thrombocytopenia, coagulation disorders, or if he is immunocompromised. Side effects are all the vaccine will have very mild flu-like illness effects, and these can be headache, nausea, myalgia, arthralgia, and injection site reactions, which is like flu-like illness. Now coming on to next very important vaccine which is used in India is Covaxin. It is developed by Bharat Biotech. Very important question is 100% indigenous vaccine. It is 100% made in India. It is developed in Bharat Biotech BSL 3 labs in association with Indian Council of Medical Research and National Institute of Virology. The name of the vaccine is BB152. What is the type? Whole virion inactivated vaccine. It is the whole virion inactivated vaccine which uses a strain NIV 2020-770. As seen with Covishield, it is also given in more than 18 years age, 2 doses 0.5 ml each. Each dose has 6 microgram of the vaccine particles, and these are given 2 doses 4 weeks apart. The route is same as Covishield, which is intramuscular deltoid. Duration of protection and level of protection is still unknown since the vaccine is introduced recently. But the protective efficacy of 2 doses high, 86 to 96%. On the other hand, Covishield had 70%. Cold chain temperature is 2 to 8 degrees centigrade. After opening the vial, it should be consumed in within 6 hours. Very important point is vaccine vial monitor is present in this vaccine. VVM is present, which can indicate the maintenance of cold chain temperature. Contraindications are again age less than 18, hypersensitivity to previous dose, pregnancy, lactation, fever and severe infection. Side effects are injection site pain, fatigue, fever, body ache, abdominal pain, nausea and vomiting. Now here is the side-by-side comparison of both the vaccines. You can take a screenshot if you want. Now coming on to vaccines used worldwide. First we will discuss Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. The generic name of this vaccine is Tocilizumab. The generic name of this Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine is Tocilizumab. It is developed by Pfizer-BioNTech company. The name of the vaccine is BNT162b2. Generic name Tocilizumab. The very important point about this vaccine is this requires a diluent 0.9% NaCl, and it is not a liquid vaccine. It is a modified mRNA vaccine. What is the antigen used? Antigen used is spike protein, that is spike glycoprotein on the surface of SARS coronavirus. Important point in this is it can be given in more than 16 years of age, in contrast to Covaxin and Covishield. There are two doses. Here it is 0.3 ml each and 3 weeks apart. Also it is given in intramuscular deltoid. Protective efficacy of two doses is 95%. Why this vaccine has not been introduced in India? Because of very stringent cold chain temperature of -80 to -60 degrees centigrade. After opening or thawing, it should also be used within 6 hours, and it is to be kept in 2 to 5 degrees centigrade. Do not refreeze the vaccine again. Contraindications are age less than 16, severe allergic reaction, pregnancy and lactation. Mild side effects can be seen with this vaccine, like fever, headache, myalgia, arthralgia, nausea, injection site pain and lymphadenopathy. Coming to vaccine Moderna. It is developed by Moderna company in adjunction with NIAID and BARNA. The name of the vaccine is mRNA 1273. It is also a modified mRNA vaccine. It requires a delivery system which is LNP, pegylated lipid nanoparticle. The antigen used is again spike glycoprotein of SARS-CoV-2. Age is more than 18 years. Two doses 0.5 ml each 4 weeks apart is given intramuscular deltoid. The protective efficacy is 94.5%. Cold chain temperature is 2 to 8 degrees centigrade. But at -40 degrees centigrade, it can be stored for up to 4 months. It should be used within 6 hours of opening the vial. Contraindication: age less than 18, severe allergic reaction, pregnancy, lactation. Two very important side effects are facial swelling and Bell's palsy. Facial swelling and Bell's palsy. We can also have mild flu-like illness in this case, like fever, headache, myalgia, arthralgia, nausea, injection site pain and lymphadenopathy. Now let's discuss both the vaccines side by side. Thank you very much guys for listening patiently. Stay tuned. I will be posting a quiz on COVID-19 based on this lecture after some days, and will also cover some other in-depth details which we have missed in this lecture. Like, share and subscribe for the latest updates on COVID-19 and the stuff related to medicine. Follow my page Medi Lectures on Instagram. Link is in the description.